Hi, everybody. It's Tim Constantine from the Washington Times, joined, as I always am, by our good friend for America, David Bozell. Hey, David.
Hey, Tim. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thank
Good.
you. You know, we've talked a lot the last couple of weeks about the presidential election, but also up for grabs is the House of Representatives and the United States Senate. And whoever wins, whether it's Trump or Harris, has to deal with Congress. That's the reality. If you're a Republican and you got a Democrat House and a Democrat Senate, it's a lot harder to get anything done. If your party controls both of them, oh my God, you got 2 years to go do whatever you can accomplish. But let's kind of decipher and try to decode what the election's going to look like. Let's start out on the House side. The House, the Republicans, if you remember a couple years ago, there was going to be a red wave, and they were supposed to win 40 seats. It was going to be like the 1990s all over again. They squeaked out a victory, but they've got, what, a 3 or 4 seat margin right now. They're very, very hard pressed to get anything done there because even within the Republicans, they have splits, they have anger, they have frustration. So what's going to happen when we go into 2025?
Right.
Who will be controlling the House?
Yeah, I've got Democrats controlling the House in 2025 by 1 vote, 218 to 217. The 3 most competitive districts were basically the districts that are going to determine who has control are going to be Don Bacon's district in Nebraska 2, the Lone District in Alaska, and Iowa 1. Those are going to be the most competitive districts. They could go either direction. I've got Democrats winning. They need 1 out of the 3 on my map.
If we ever needed a
that.
poster for why the American system is great,
it's awesome.
We have these giant states like California, and Texas, and New York, and what you've just described is Alaska, which has a tiny population.
Yeah.
Nebraska, which has a tiny population.
Yep.
These are states that have in their grasp the ability to control the direction of the United States House of Representatives. It's a great system.
It's an awesome system. And look, the country tends to vote for divided government. And I know these senators like to complain, like, if you just give us 60 votes, we can do something. I think that's happened like 2 times in our history, 3 times, and it's always fleeting. It's always because of a death. So it's the country, if they're going to put one party in the White House, they're going to put the other party in charge of either the House or the Senate. But I do see Democrats taking control because the margins are so slim, because Republicans, the majority, the districts that made up the Republican majority in the first place are in California and New York. These things are kind of easily flippable for Democrats. 4 competitive races in California for Republicans. I think Democrats win at least 2 of them. Same thing in New York. I do think Republicans gain in North Carolina, which could help if there's this 269 tie in the presidential and the electoral college, because whoever owns most of the state delegations gets to pick the winner in the House. But I think it's just going to be nip tuck, and in terms of like what happens next and what does this mean, it just means that you're going to see a lot more CRs. Spending will continue to go on as usual. I don't think the Democrats they're going to try to make life difficult for President Trump if he were to win. But because the margin is going to be so small, I think their bark is going to be a lot more fiercer than their actual bite.
I agree with you that I think it's going to be Speaker Jeffries starting in January. I will tell you that I disagree with him on many things, but he is a reasonable, rational man as opposed to some of the alternatives from either party that would be there. I'll tell you what bothers me the most, and I remember talking to Jim Jordan about this prior to the 2022 election when everybody thought there would be a red wave, and he thought he was going to become chairman of Judiciary. And there was the discussion of what they would do. And he told me at the time, we're going to do a lot of investigation into Hunter Biden. And I said, do you think that's a good idea? And he said, well, of course it is. He's done this and this and this. I think there's corruption in the Biden family. And I said, there may be. But to the American public, they have just spent years investigating Trump and looking at all this foolishness. And that's part of the reason the Democrats lost the House to begin with. What Americans actually care about, in my opinion, but I told Chairman Jordan this, is they care about inflation in the economy. They care about taxes. They care about the border. If you could take a checklist and the House just focused solely on that, instead of the circus sideshow of Hunter Biden, then America would think, wow, these guys are doing something. And they would go. But I said, if you spend all your time doing that, you could very well be out the door. And I think that's what's going to happen, as America looks and thinks it doesn't matter who's in charge there because neither one of them are doing anything.
Well, there's no end game with the Hunter Biden investigation. That was really, I mean, I don't mind them investigating scandals in the White House. It's what they're there. It's what they're there to do. And for God's sakes, we're paying for this. But there was no end game, and there was just no path for the Republicans to execute their goals in terms of Hunter Biden and the Biden family and the big guy and all this stuff. It amounted to just keeping your base energized on late night Fox television. That's fine. There's a purpose for that. You know, there's a purpose for that. I get it. But that just sucked up a lot of the oxygen out of the room. And you're right. There were real issues. There still remain real issues with crime, border, the economy. And the Republicans have just fallen flat on their face on the most important, the congressional Republicans have fallen flat on their face on the most important issues of the moment. And not to mention, really, they don't like each other, Tim. I mean, there are factions within this Republican House operation that just do not like each other. And I would hope the next leadership, if it's not Mike Johnson, finds a way to unite the Republican Party in the House of Representatives, because they have been splintered for far too long. And they just take pot shots at each other on social media as if they're just kids at a playground.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. And I will tell you, anytime one, particularly if there's a large number, you know, if you get a 30-seat lead or a 40-seat lead, either party, this is not unique to the Republicans or to the Democrats, both parties do this, is the extreme elements start to get a little cocky. They think we can do anything. We got 30 extra votes. And they start pushing an extreme agenda. Right. And it doesn't matter whether that's the left, the crazies on the left, and there are some crazies on the right. And so those people start interfering with their own party moving ahead, being productive, doing things. Because they're not going to get 100% of what they want, they're going to cause trouble. They're going to vote something down. They're going to throw out the speaker. They're going to do whatever they're going to threaten to do, and it happens over and over. Doesn't matter which party's in control. So sometimes I think that sliver, that tight 218 to 214, or 221 to 2, I think those are good numbers because it keeps the leadership honest. It keeps the extremes honest. Nobody can get too crazy in any direction.
It's actually easier for the Republicans to be in the minority by a slim margin. It just would be. I just don't think they have the get up and go. I think there's a real lack of talent in terms of how to be an effective member of Congress on the Republican side. And I'm not blaming the extreme factions. I shouldn't say extreme, but just the Freedom Caucus types and some of the left wing rhinos. The caucus heartbeat as a whole is, the majority of it is a lot more left wing than the base is. And I think the base is entirely too tolerant of the left wingers in the party. I really, really do. Yes, it makes them the majority, but if you're not doing anything with it, it just doesn't work for any of us. And it hasn't. I mean, the Republicans in the House have not accomplished much of anything with multiple opportunities under multiple different structures in the last 10 to 20, 15 years. And I think they're better in the minority, honestly.
All right, we got to move on to Senate, the Senate side, and there's a map that shows, who's up for grabs this year. There are certain places that we know it's not going to change, and I'll give you a couple examples. In California, it absolutely pains me to say Adam Schiff is going to be a United States Senator. You couldn't have a more dishonest, unrealistic, horrible human being. And Adam, if you're watching, I mean every word I said. Horrible human being. You couldn't have a worse guy. And he's going to be one of the 100. Steve Garvey, wonderful man, but he's not going to win in the state of California. You go down to Texas and they keep saying, oh, Cruz is in trouble. He's not in trouble. He's not going to win by 11 points the way Trump did, but he's going to win. He's going to win. So you can pick and choose those, but there are some states that are up for grabs, and that's what I want to talk to you about is, can the Republicans flip? They're in the minority right now, but can they make enough difference to take over the Senate?
Yeah, I think they can. I think they're gonna flip West Virginia and they're gonna flip Montana. They'll land at 51. There's an opportunity in Pennsylvania. I know the Democrats are worried about Bob Casey in Pennsylvania, and then if Trump succeeds in Pennsylvania, that makes it even more difficult. The Casey family in Pennsylvania are kind of iconic up there, and so I have a difficult time seeing him lose, but they seem awfully worried. I don't think it really matters, though. 51, 52, 53, it doesn't really matter. In terms of what effect it has, Supreme Court. Clarence Thomas could retire at any time. Judge Alito could retire at any time. Those guys are getting up there, candidly. The Supreme Court is why the Senate control matters. And I think the Republicans get it in 2025.
As a conservative myself, I think the most impactful thing that President Trump did as President 45 was the 3 Supreme Court justices. It changed the direction. In my mind, it reset. It adjusted some things to bring it back to true constitutional following. And I'm with you. I'm concerned that if the Democrats control that, and if you get Kamala Harris in, that not only will she have an easy time choosing people, but she will choose people extreme left, and we will have an activist Supreme Court. You can argue that from late 1960s till now, we've had activist periods, but I don't think we've seen anything yet. If Kamala Harris has a Democratic Senate and she appoints left of left people, I think we're going to have people rewriting, essentially. I don't mean literally that the Constitution will be rewrit, but through their interpretation, they will rewrite the Constitution, not in what it says, but in what they think it should say. And there's nowhere to go. If the Supreme Court says that and does that, that's the final word.
Well, they're also not going to allow a Justice Kagan to get up there in years, and because Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg passes away, they're not going to allow that mistake to happen again. So if they need to convince one of them to retire, one of the liberal justices to retire, they will. And so it's just going to make the Supreme Court younger or more left wing. See, we're living in a weird time, Tim. Congress is not really that important anymore. We kind of live in the executive order era. You talked about what was President Trump's most impactful decisions. Yeah, you're right. I mean, the Supreme Court has the most lasting impact. His policy achievements domestically were awesome, but fleeting because Biden just reverses them. And so until we elevate Congress as a society and say, you guys are in control of the money, you guys need to be have a bigger impact in this 3-horse monster called with the branches of government. Until we do that, we're going to live in an executive order era where the president just is going to do what he wants to do on the regulatory side and on the trade side. But the next man up, if it's the opposite party, is just going to reverse him, and he's not going to have a legacy. And then you're going to leave everything basically to the courts. And we're kind of unfairly, and I think it's a huge mistake, how much we as a society have elevated the courts in our current model. But it's where we're at.
On the Senate side, you say you believe the Republicans will take that. Maybe 51, maybe as high as 53, but you believe come January, the Republicans will be in charge of the United States Senate. Last question on that topic, who will be the majority leader? Because Mitch McConnell is gone, and there are 3 different United States senators who would like to take that leadership post. Who do you think it'll be?
Yeah, well, it'll be someone named John, John Barrasso, John Thune, John Cornyn, and all I can predict is a John. Probably Cornyn, and it seems strange that I would say that now, but he's raising a ton of money for his colleagues. He's been the deputy for the longest, and he wants the job. So
And he looks like he's out of central casting. If you were making a movie and you were choosing a U.S. senator, look at that guy.
Yeah, well, look, you would think that his role in some of the gun control legislation that the Republicans have, Democrats have passed with some Republican help, you think that that would be disqualifying. I wonder if that rears its ugly head against him. But I think the leader who promises the most change in the process is probably going to be the winner, because I know there's a cadre of senators that want that. They just feel stifled. And McConnell has just had an iron grip on this thing for too long, and they want to have their say. I mean, if you're supposed to be the world's greatest deliberative body, then how about we get back to some deliberating? Which they don't do.
What a cool idea.
Yeah.
Here's, out of those three Johns, my preference would be John Barrasso, because I know him, I like him, I can pick up the phone and call him. I like the ability to call the majority leader. So he's my first choice. Cornyn, I know and I like most of his policies. Not all, but I like most of his policies. And I do think he'd be very effective, although, to your last point, I think we run the risk of it kind of being old school, where he's setting the guardrails as to what can and cannot be deliberated on. My least favorite of the three would be Thune, because I feel, and I apologize to him, but I feel some inauthenticity. And I don't mean that he's a phony or a fake. I don't mean that. I just feel like it's not his natural state. It's not his natural place to be there. I feel like he has to stop and think. Like, some people naturally speak multiple languages and their mind just jumps into French or Spanish or whatever the language is. When I think of French, I have to think, what does that really mean in English? My translation is not good because it's not natural. I feel like that's how he is in political leadership, is he has to stop and think on every single item. How's this going to play? What's this going to be? It isn't just a natural unfolding of the issue of the day.
Yep, I agree. If I were central casting out of Hollywood, I said, I need to find a senator. It would look like John Thune. But I just think his moment has passed him. The moment has passed him by. The Republican Party base is much more populist than the party elite realizes or wants to admit. And he comes from this early 2000 Bush era model that I just don't think anyone's going to be enthusiastic about at all. That Cornyn comes from Texas. That's kind of saves him a little bit, and he's done some conservative things. He's got some conservative things on his record. I agree on a personal level, Barrasso would be the best choice, but I do think it's going to be Cornyn because of his fundraising prowess.
Right. All right, my friend, we got to go. Thank you, as always, for America. He is David Bozell, and for the Washington Times, I say thanks for joining us.